Buonasera a tutti, good evening and welcome to the Italian Radio Hour. Io sono Viviana and I would like to welcome back our regular listeners and also welcome any new listeners. Also be sure to like us on Instagram and Facebook at Italian Radio Hour and subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch up on any past video interviews. Vorrei dare il benvenuto ai nostri ascoltatori da tutto il mondo, grazie per essere con noi anche oggi mentre continuiamo il nostro viaggio per l'Italia e la cultura italiana. So, what do Campania, Calabria, Basilicata, and Puglia have in common? Volcanoes, ancient wines, Greek history, rugged landscapes, and some of the most extraordinary wines in Italy. Wines that for too long have remained overlooked outside their own territories. While much of the wine world continues to focus on Tuscany and Piedmont, southern Italy has quietly preserved something deeply authentic. Indigenous grapes, ancient farming traditions, dramatic volcanic terroir, and a profound connection between wine, culture, and identity. Our guest today has dedicated more than 20 years to documenting that world. Maria Christina Liotta is the author of the newly published Places of Origin, Wines of Southern Italy, Campania, Calabria, Basilicata, and Puglia. An extraordinary journey through the vineyards, villages, volcanic slopes, and hidden wine territories of Italy's south. Through years of travel, hundreds of producers' interviews, and visits to all 65 protected wine appellations of southern Italy, Maria has created one of the most comprehensive explorations ever written on the wines and cultures of Italian South. Today, we'll explore not only wine, but also the deeper meaning of place, heritage, resilience, and what Southern Italy can still teach us about authenticity in a rapidly globalizing world. So stay tuned, don't go anywhere, ma prima pubblicità. Parli italiano? Do you want to learn, improve, or master your Italian? Istituto Mondo Italiano can help. Located in the heart of Regent Square, Mondo Italiano offers small group classes and one-on-one private tutoring in person or online to help you learn Italian in no time. Visit us online at istitutomondoitaliano.org. Cara Maria, welcome to the Italian Radio Hour. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Buongiorno. It is such a pleasure to be here. It's a true honor. Thank you for inviting me.
So, Maria, you treated us with your beautiful publication, Wines of Southern Places of Origin, Wines of Southern Italy. You actually came to Istituto Mondo Italiano, and now we can enjoy this wealth of knowledge that you have researched so deeply for so long. But I would like to start with your background because you are a woman of many talents, many professions, Wall Street, healthcare, science, and now wine scholarship. How did this journey begin?
Well, my original career path was in healthcare, as you stated, and it was an idea my father had, and I followed his suggestions. I was always interested in medicine. And so I followed the path and became a doctor of optometry. And so I went to school for 4 years in Philadelphia, came back to Pittsburgh, where I am from originally, or a little town north of Pittsburgh. And I practiced there for 4 years. And while I was practicing, I had been interested in the stock market also all my life. And I ended up going back to school for my MBA. I wanted to marry healthcare with Wall Street. And so I went on after my MBA and moved to Manhattan, and I became a research analyst in the healthcare sector on Wall Street. I worked Morgan Stanley, Bear Stearns. And from there, I went on to become a healthcare fund manager. So it's sort of a continuation of what I began, but at a different platform.
So when did wines come into place into your life?
Wines came into my life in earnest in New York However, I watched my grandfather, who's from Sicily. I watched him grow his grapes, and he made wines. And, he really was a big influence in my life from not just a wine perspective, but from respect for land and the relationship with nature. We'd go for walks in the woods, and he was a big animal lover, but he could grow anything, and I think that really was a fundamental part of me throughout my entire life, and it still is. And I saw that reproduced in my visits in southern Italy. That was a theme that was recurring to me throughout my whole career.
And at some point, Southern Italian wine stopped being simply an interest and became a life project.
Yeah, as we started to talk about, wines really became a part of my life in New York. Um, the in New York, you can get wines from all over the world. So I was exposed to a lot more than I had been exposed to growing up in Pennsylvania. And I started collecting wines mostly from Italy. And, I started with the wines that we all know, Barolo,
The usual
Barbaresco,
suspects.
exactly, Brunello di Montalcino. But, being Southern Italian and all, I said there must be more than what we're hearing about on a regular basis. So, as a wine collector, I did travel a lot, going through not just Italy, but France, um, California. And I started to spend more and more time in Southern Italy, traveling throughout those regions. And I really fell in love with what I was learning there. I think, Viviana, more than any other wine growing area I visited, the South gave me a sense of place and tradition and history, and that was told through the wines, unlike any other places that I had visited. Um, and what started out for me as a curiosity really snowballed and became a passion. And the more I learned, the more I realized these were stories that needed to be told. Um, Even in my wine studies in New York, I felt that the South was well underrepresented. And I just became driven to write this book, to tell the world, to increase awareness for the beautiful work that is being done there. There's a great history to the South, as a strategic center, starting way back in the time of the ancient Greeks. Um, but even now, that it has such an importance in the world of wine. As you probably realize, Italy is the number one producer in all the world of wines. And the South produces 25% of all of Italy's wines. Puglia produces
Mhm.
17% of
Wow.
Italy's wines. But we're not just talking volume. We are talking high quality wines, the protected places of origin,
Mhm.
wines made under the DOP and the IGP labels have been increasing over the past couple of decades. So it to me, Southern Italy has an importance, not just from the perspective of quantity, but of quality, and
Mhm.
of the importance of the indigenous grapes that you can find there that don't grow anywhere else.
Yeah. So there are a couple of things. First, in the title, when you right places of origin, and you have already elaborated on that. It really means something to you emotionally. We can definitely feel that, but also your people might think about wine as a product, but your book really feels almost anthropological, like you consciously set out to document culture and memory through wine. So, in your numerous travels, I was wondering if you did encounter or what traditions or vineyard practices um, struck with you, maybe made you feel you were stepping into another century because the approach was still not primitive in a way that it was rudimental, but primitive because it was the approach towards nature that was still so pure. So I was wondering if there was any particular, again, traditional practice that caught your attention right off the bat.
There are many of those. Just about every region offers a smorgasbord of those kinds of experiences. But I I would say certainly one of the most impressive sights comes from Campania, from an area called Aversa,
Mm-hmm.
where they are growing the grapes much like they did hundreds of years ago. They create these um, vines that grow up the trees up to 15 meters high. And specifically, this is a grape called Asprigno, which is
Mm-hmm.
a local grape indigenous to northern Campania. And to be in front of these curtains of vines is just, it's almost otherworldly. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Also, when you consider that it's very, very difficult to grow these, it's very expensive. And whereas at one time, decades ago, they used to cover the area, now there are very few parcels left. And we have the wine producers to thank, producers like I Borboni and Tenuta Fontana, who work diligently and very, very hard to keep this practice going, to keep this tradition in place. In fact, I was just there for the launch of my book, and I visited I Borboni, and I surprised them. They weren't expecting me. And they had just come in from the fields where they were replacing the trees that these vines grow on. And the work that it takes to keep that practice is really incomprehensible and just very impressive.
Mhm. So we're going to talk about some of the territories that you have explored with some of their unique features. So one of the places you take us to is Monte Vulture in Basilicata. And so tell us a little bit about what this territory will offer to us, what it looks like. Obviously, by looking at Monte Vulture right off the bat, we have this feeling of power, landscape. How did you feel when you the first time you stood there?
It really impressive. I studied a lot about the area before I went. And so to be standing there and experiencing the land, the soils, to see in some places, you can actually see the layers of sediment. Um, Monte Voltere is very, very interesting because the eruptive cycle for this volcano lasted about 500,000 years, which in the context of historic eruptive cycles is
Mhm.
extraordinary. Um, so that I won't go into too much detail, but the fact that it lasted so long gives you many, many, many layers. soils and deposits. And for vine growing, this is a very interesting and very important um, environment. It's very good for the vines because of the minerals, because of how deep the vines have to go to reach the nutrients and the water resources. Um, but it is also interesting because uh, of the grape that grows here, Aglianico. Aglianico is
Hmm.
a very famous grape in southern Italy. I would say if people have heard of any grape from southern Italy, it's probably Aglianico or Primitivo.
Hmm.
But Aglianico grows here on Mount Vulture, and it is the centerpiece of the Aglianico del Vulture, DOP. Um, Aglianico also grows famously in Campania, where it is the centerpiece of the Taurasi DOP. But as Elena Fucci here would tell you, here Aglianico grows on the volcano, and that gives it a very special uh, flavor, a very special texture. And it's it's a wonderful to see it growing here and to taste it from the vines, to taste these wines. Elena's story is very interesting. Elena started out on a path to becoming a geneticist. And, she grew up among these vines. Her, her father farmed the vines, her grandfather, her great grandfather. While she was away at school, she heard from her father that he was thinking of selling the vineyards, selling the land. And she just couldn't live with that. She felt in her soul she needed to return home and save this land for her family, for you know from for to respect her grandfather and her great grandfather. So she changed course too. She went from being a geneticist to an agronomist. She studied wines, came back and started making Aglianico del Vulture, and is one of the greatest winemakers now in Basilicata, and certainly probably one of the most well known. Um,
Hmm.
she has a property that's on the Titolo, what's called the Titolo lava flow. And her wines are called Titolo for that lava flow that her vineyards grow on. And she's very special. She's showing us here a piece of the volcanic sediment from her vineyards. When I first met her, she's a dynamo. When I first met her, she she took me out, showed me her vineyards, picked up the soil, and she says, "Look at my amazing soil." And
Hmm.
it is very important for the development of these vines.
And it's so interesting too. I mean, sometimes we don't even realize how deep geology shapes the identity of southern Italy, especially in that region. You are then taking us a little bit to, let me see, I think Caserta, Vesuvio, and Campi Flegrei in Campania. So here again, it looks like the vineyards around the Vesuvius might feel a little mythical, right? So by having the exposure to the Aglianico del Vulture, then the wines from this region, did working in these volcanic territories change also the way that you think about wine itself? Or did you add an additional layer of the complexity, things that we don't normally think of when we think about wine?
It certainly adds a layer of complexity. Um, the South has the only active volcanoes in Italy right now, and they have some of the largest volcanic complexes in Italy. Um, Campania itself has 19 DOPs. 17 of the 19 DOPs have volcanic soils because there was so much volcanic activity. So I think this is something you can only appreciate after you've studied these wines a while. But it is a very important component of the South and appreciating the wines of Southern Italy. Even in Calabria, where there are no volcanoes, we find volcanic soils. And in fact, it was just recently they discovered why. Um, there, there is a volcano off the coast of Calabria that contributed to the soils and the soil developments there. And so you find volcanic soils even in Calabria, where there are no volcanoes. And I thought that was very interesting. Uh, um, you did mention geology, and I want to just, this is an aside, but I think it's very important for understanding Southern Italy. Um, so Campania, Calabria, and Basilicata are mostly mountainous and foothills. Puglia is a very different area. In fact, only 2% of Puglia is covered by mountains. And in fact, central Puglia is a slab of limestone that becomes about 600 meters thick in places. They also have a giant plain called the Tavoliere Plain, second largest plain in all of Italy. So why is it that Puglia looks so much different than the rest of southern Italy? And the fact is, it was a very different tectonic plate. It was the African plate that rammed into the European plate. And now we have this area in Puglia that represents, that looks more like Florida than it does the rest of southern Italy. So it was an aside, but I thought that's an important point to bring
Well,
up.
we'll definitely talk about Puglia and the Tavoliere, and that's an amazing piece of information to have. So thank you for sharing that. In the Campi Flegrei, still in Campania, you have this amazing picture. Obviously Virgil used the image of entrance to hell. So, as you can, from the picture and from there's something ancient and mysterious in these places. So it looks like also mythology and history become part of your wine journey. So tell us a little bit about this image and some of the mythology that came to place as you were doing your research.
I had studied this before I got there, and I said, I have to go here. They have wine, they have wines that they make here. They have vines growing here. How can that be? Um, but I got there, and sure enough, certainly this is the Solfatara. There are no vines growing in the Solfatara. In fact,
Mhm.
it was hard for me to even get access here. I was only able to get close to it once. They closed it off because it is quite active and quite dangerous to be in near those gases and so forth. But um, Campi Flegrei has 7 craters, and the vines grow on the edges of those old craters. And they have grown there since ancient times. In fact, there are Roman writings from Pliny the Elder and so forth that talk about the vines growing along the edges of Lake Averna and these places. But it is, in fact, very much as Virgil portrayed. It is quite active, quite mythical, and it's very impressive geologically. Again, the vines that grow here are very interesting. If you can go to
Mhm.
the next
Uh,
photo,
so we have
that it's
lots of.
very active. seismically.
The
This
one that,
area, the Campi Flegrei would be, there we go. So you see, the area is so active seismically that the land recedes down the hill. There's recession. And these winemakers that work there, there are only a handful of them left. And Raffaele Moccia is one of them. His winery is called Agnanum, and it's named for the Agnano crater where his vines grow, where his farm is. The area is seismically active, and so in order to keep these grapes growing, he has to rebuild these terraces by hand 2
wow.
or 3 times a year. And you can see how the vine bends. That's because they keep going downhill, and he works very hard to keep those vines going. It's terraced. That's you can't really tell from here, but these vineyards are all terraced, and it's quite a process for him. But again, these winemakers are extraordinary people because they keep these traditions going. They keep advancing the quality of these wines. But it's quite a spectacle in Campi Flegrei.
Another wine referring to the Vesuvius is Lacrima Christi. Tell us a little bit about this wine in general. And I believe you had another memorable encounter with Ciro Giordano, a little bit about his practices, but in general, it's about the Lacrima Christi.
So Ciro is a winemaker that works on the Monte Somma part of Somma Vesuvius. Somma Vesuvius, as you see, has 2 peaks. The older peak is Mount Somma. In fact, it was Monte Somma when it exploded in 79 AD. It was twice the height it is now then. And that explosion left us with 2 peaks. Ciro is on the Monte Somma part. Monte Somma is important because it is on the it does not face the Bay of Naples. It's cooler. It has a longer growing season. So the grapes that grow on that side of the mountain, I think, have greater complexity. Lacrima Christi, of course, is a very famous and ancient wine that has been around since Roman times. It is a very interesting process, how we got to the Lacrima Christi name. It was a wine that was made by the monks, and they used to filter it through cloths before the yeasts had enough time to convert all the sugars to alcohol. So you were left with a sweet wine, but it was the dripping through the cloth that looked like tears. And because it was made by the monks for religious purposes mostly, the name Christ was attached to it, Tears of Christ. And it is a process that we no longer use. Lacrima Christi now is made as a dry wine, but it still carries the name. And the only place that that you can make Lacrima Christi is on Mount Vesuvius.
Wow. So we're going to take a very short break, and we will be back. We'll be talking about the Amalfi Coast and ancient pergola wines. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Do you love Italian food? Want to learn the secrets of homemade pasta, sauces, and traditional recipes, just like Nana used to make? At Mondo Italiano, our authentic Italian cooking classes bring the taste of Italy right to Pittsburgh. From fresh pasta to regional specialties, every class is a delicious journey through Italy's culinary traditions. Spots fill quickly, so reserve your seat today. Call us at 412-478-2681 or find us online. Mondo Italiano, where Italy comes alive one dish at a time.
Un caffè, per favore. For more than 35 years, Pittsburgh has started its mornings with La Prima Espresso. From freshly roasted beans from around the world to the perfect espresso or cappuccino, every cup is crafted with care. Stop by and enjoy the warmth of our baristas and familiar faces, or bring the taste of Italy home. Order online today at laprima.com. La Prima Espresso, Pittsburgh's coffee. Still in the Campania region at this point, and the pergola, the ancient pergola-trained vines on the Amalfi Coast are breathtaking. What stories can we learn from these vineyards? What are they telling us?
This is a very important story. So I spend a lot of time talking about volcanoes. And one of the things I hadn't mentioned to you yet was that the volcanic soils protected the vines during the time of phylloxera. And phylloxera was a period that started 1865 in France. It was an inadvertent introduction of an insect by some well-meaning botanists who brought vines into England, and then got transmitted to France. But long story short, it destroyed 90% of the vineyards of France and northern Italy. And during this time, Northern Europe required grapes from southern Italy because southern Italy hadn't been affected. And so southern Italy was a lifeline during the time of phylloxera for northern Italy. But one thing during that time that wine producers and grape growers noticed was that some of their vines weren't affected. And this we learned later on, this was because they were growing in volcanic soils. So these volcanic soils protected many of southern Italy's indigenous grapes. And that is in part why we have so many indigenous grapes. One here that Dr. Gaetano Bove is showing you is a Piedi Rosso vine that's over 350 years old.
Wow.
And you have pockets of these amazing vines still growing throughout the volcanic areas in southern Italy. And I think that's a very important point. These old vines are, they create a bit of a zen. They hardly need any attention anymore. They have such a rhythm with the soil and the environment. And the wines that come from them, you might be curious how they differ from younger vines. And to me, there is a marvelous elegance to these wines. Just like the vines kind of they have their own gestalt, so do the wines. They don't need a lot of intervention. And as you can imagine, I think nothing speaks more to the identity of a wine growing area than these old vines. They're truly extraordinary.
Absolutely. And the next one, I think you were mentioning before of how, when you find yourself in front of these very impressive, extremely high vines in this case, Alberata Aversana, with workers climbing ladders into their really towering vines. And you saw that in person, right?
Yeah.
So
And
it
a
almost
couple,
feels like a physically heroic traditional viticulture, because it's not just hard labor; it's also pretty risky there.
you're right on, Viviana. Um, it's hard to find workers that can do this. It's a particular skill. And by the way, these ladders, they're called scalili. These ladders are custom made, and they have a shape that's a little narrower, so that the workers can grip the ladder between their knees while they're standing up high, because it's very windy here. You know, we're not far from the coast here in these vineyards. It's very windy. So you're up high, the wind is blowing, you're on this rickety ladder. It's quite a serious adventure for these workers. But it is it's amazing, and the grapes themselves are very unique. The Esprinho grapes. And I'm thrilled that there are people that are preserving these vines and these grapes.
Yeah, even because, you know, the risk is that certain traditions might disappear within a generation, but it's reassuring to see and to hear about the pride and wanted to even change life completely, to go back to the roots and no pun intended, and take on the family tradition. We're going to move to Puglia because you talked about the Tavoliere. That is actually where my family is from, specifically from Foggia. So now this is a home turf. I want to hear
Wow,
all about it. Okay.
I didn't
Uh,
know that.
yes,
Yes,
yes.
I
So,
spent a lot of time here. This is a very important place for viticulture in Puglia. And yes, the Tavoliere. Um, as you know, we're talking probably 200 meters above sea level. The Tavoliere isn't level. It's tilted a bit. So, you know, as you get near the Daunia Mountains, it's a little higher, about 300 meters, down to probably 100 meters as you get closer to the Adriatic side of Puglia. So you have higher elevation. Sometimes people think of plains and they think of hot. It's just hot, and the grapes will ripen quickly and have a lot of sugar, and so maybe it doesn't make for such interesting wines. But the grapes that grow here um, have the benefit of having a little higher elevation, so they develop more acidity, more personality than maybe you would otherwise think. But the Tavoliere Plain, as you know, rose from out of the sea. So the soils are
mhm,
quite interesting, and the wines that come from here, Nero di Troia, is one of the most important grapes that come out of the Tavoliere, the Foggia. And I
mhm.
think these make extraordinary wines. There's a little bit of an interesting history to the Nero di Troia, as the name implies, Troy,
Mhm.
the Greek city of Troy. Um, the legend says that King Diomedes, king of Argos, came after the defeat of Troy, came to Puglia and planted this dark grape on the shores of the Ofanto River, which is just the southern border of the Foggia, as you know. And that's how Nero di Troia came to be in the Foggia.
Mhm.
It's a romantic story, not exactly true. It's but it is
We enjoy going by it. Even
we enjoy the
because,
romantic stories.
yeah, and also Puglia has changed enormously in the wine world over the last 20 years. So, what excites you the most about its future?
Puglia,
Yes. Hmm.
Puglia, Puglia has Puglia has such an amazing terrain that I think we've just scratched the surface on the kinds of wines and the quality of the wines that will come from here. Puglia historically is known for more of a high volume production center, but wine producers in the last couple of decades have really been advancing the quality. And I think we're going to see more of that. Um, I think a good sign is the producers that we have now, some of these smaller producers here, like Cantina La Marquesa, and the work they're doing. We're also seeing large producers from other areas coming to Puglia because they see the viticultural promise that Puglia has. Antinori, for example, bought Tormaresca, and then they started in one part of Puglia, and now they're making investments in other areas. And I think that is a very important signal for
Yeah.
the wine quality of the
Yes.
area.
So you suggest that Southern Italian wines perhaps are still a little misunderstood internationally. So I was wondering, what would you pour for someone that says, I don't understand Southern Italian wines? Or obviously your publication, your book is already huge breakthrough to say, okay, let's educate, let's share stories and so forth. So yes, what would you pour for someone who says they don't understand Southern Italian wines?
I would first ask what they normally drink,
Okay.
because I think that's an important piece of the
The starting
context.
point. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But if I knew nothing about it at all, and you just said, I'm not telling you anything, just pour me what you think are some of the best. Um, I would pour you. May I mention producers specifically, or do you want just areas
Whatever
that
you feel like, whatever it's an introduction. Mm-hmm.
I would pour a Luigi Tece Aglianico. I
Mm-hmm.
think I was talking about the zen of vines, and uh, I think Luigi Tece would, I think Luigi Tece has this particular zen with his Aglianico wines. There's an elegance, there is an expressiveness of the terroir that is that would resonate with, I think, just about anybody that would
Mm-hmm.
taste that wine.
Mm-hmm.
And if you prefer white wines, I would recommend a Pietracupa, either a Greco or a Fiano. And
Mm-hmm.
I say the same thing about that producer. His name is Sabino Lofredo. Again, his winery is Pietracupa, named for the locale where he produces. But these
Mm-hmm.
wines represent an experience that I think is unique and speaks to
Mm-hmm.
the terroir and speaks to the high quality that Southern Italy has to offer.
Yeah. And the amazing thing that also it looks like for the wines of Southern Italy, you can still access an extraordinary quality at accessible prices. Is it because people haven't discovered them yet, so they're flying under the radar? Do you think it has to do also with the practices that might be again closer to nature? We saw some of the custom-made ladders and things that are still, again, going back to that primordial expression we used before. Do you have a take on it? Do you have your own thoughts? Maybe we
I
shouldn't
think
tell
it's a
people
combination.
and just keep it quiet for ourselves. Not kidding.
I worry about that because since I've been studying these wines, the prices have escalated.
Mhm.
So as I think they become more and more known, the prices will increase. Part of it is marketing. Um, but I want to mention something else that I noticed while I was down there. There is a tradition of trying to keep the wines accessible. A lot of these producers sell just locally, or primarily locally. So they want to keep the prices low to keep the wines accessible. It's a sensibility, almost, I would say, of the Southern Italian people. And
Yeah,
so
it's
they
the sense of hospitality that you drink your wine with your friends. So all of a sudden, if you're making an everyday enjoyable experience out of everyone's pocket, where is the hospitality? Where is the community? So
exactly. And this is an important sensibility in southern Italy. Even with applying, the DOP to the wine growing areas, a lot of producers don't want to use it. Leone de
mhm,
Castris, for example, for their Five Roses, which was the first rosato ever made anywhere in Italy. Um, I asked them, it certainly is eligible for a DOP status. And they told me, we want to keep our wines accessible. So we keep them at the lower quality level in terms of title, but
mhm.
certainly the quality is very high and very eligible for a DOP status. So it's part of the mentality and the sensibility of the South.
So after spending now decades traveling through southern Italy, what do you understand now about the South that you didn't understand before? And then again, even now, the sense of hospitality that might impact the price of wine to keep it accessible. That is something that goes way beyond, understanding the wines. It's just the mentality, the culture, other elements that really have become yours and yours in your understanding of this wonderful part of Italy.
The unity with nature really impressed me. And again, it is part of maintaining these traditions and understanding sort of the need to keep your hands off. You don't want to intervene too much, because then you create a formulaic wine. And
Mhm.
they want the earth to create the wine. They want the grapes to create the wine. These aren't, for the most part, formulaic wines. These are wines that come from the earth, come from the tradition, whether it's a particular winemaking practice, whether it's a particular way they grow the grapes, um, the vines they grow on, the soils, the particular clone or absence of clones, rather. These wines and these winemakers have this unity that I haven't seen anywhere else.
Mhm. Wonderful. So, Maria, the book just came out, so I'm sure that your schedule before you know will be quite packed with tours, book presentations, wine tasting. If there is any event you would like to share with the audience, when will you come to Pittsburgh? I'm extending an official invitation on behalf of Istituto Mondo Italiano so that anyone that is local to us, if you would bless us with your presence and your knowledge, I'm sure we can get a full house. But what is on your calendar? I think you were just in Italy, so you got to see some of the
Yes, I just
producers.
got back.
Yeah.
Uh, for the summer, I have a couple podcasts I'm doing. I will be going to Nashville. I was kindly invited to go to Miel Restaurant to be part of their wine series. They do a summer wine series, so I will be doing that. But I would love to come back to Pittsburgh, and you just say the word, and I'll get on the plane. I really
Absolutely.
appreciate that very
And
much.
it was, again, it's been a true pleasure. And for all of you that would like to follow more of Maria's work and acquire a very, very special publication, this is not just tasting notes. This is a piece of history, culture, tradition, listening to the earth through the stories that Maria has witnessed beforehand or was told that will I have to say that a must have in your collection. Unfortunately, our time together is up. Maria, is there anything else you would like to add, or we didn't talk about it that you wanted to mention?
I just want to thank you for having me on. It's been a real pleasure, and it's an honor to be here with you. Thank you, and thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you, Maria. So again, you can find more and also purchase the book at winesofsouthernitaly.com. Again, read more about Maria, but mainly make sure that you do take home a copy of Places of Origin, Wines of Southern Italy, Campania, Calabria, Basilicata, and Puglia. So it is time for us to say arrivederci alla prossima, and we want to thank you for tuning in into the program. If you have any questions or comments, or if you have any topics you would like us to address, please contact us at italianradiohour@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. And remember, if you or any of your family and friends have missed a prior episode or would like to listen to this episode again, subscribe to the Italian Radio Hour on YouTube or where you catch your favorite podcasts. And also don't forget to share, because sharing is caring. So do share this podcast. Again, thank you. Grazie mille, Maria. Looking forward to seeing you back in Pittsburgh then. We want to thank
Grazie a te.
Also our sponsors, Istituto Mondo Italiano e la Prima Espresso. Until next time, alla prossima. Ciao ciao!